There were millions of tons of food, but no one could afford to buy.
Have you ever wondered how families survived with almost nothing during the Great Depression? Imagine stepping into your grandmother's kitchen during the Great Depression, a time when the world outside was marked by uncertainty, scarcity, and a longing for stability. Despite the challenges of the era, where every family felt the weight of the economic downturn and the distant echoes of conflict, the kitchen was a place of warmth and ingenuity. Even as the world seemed to unravel, your grandmother could transform the most basic ingredients into something special, something that brought comfort and hope. Picture her in that small, modest kitchen, making do with what little she had: flour, potatoes, maybe a few vegetables from the garden. The scent of freshly baked bread or a simmering pot of potato soup filled the room, a humble magic that brought everyone together at the table. These were meals crafted out of necessity, yet they carried a love that transcended the hardships. In today's video, we're diving into 23 of these forgotten Depression-era meals, simple dishes that embody resilience and creativity. They tell stories of strength, of making something meaningful out of almost nothing. Let's uncover these culinary memories together and celebrate the resourcefulness of a generation that knew how to find joy in even the most trying times. Cornmeal mush. Cornmeal mush was a Depression-era classic, often made from little more than cornmeal, water, and a dash of salt. Picture this: a mother standing at a stove, carefully stirring the pot, creating a meal that was simple yet filling. Cornmeal mush could be eaten hot, served with a little milk or sugar for breakfast, or left to cool, sliced and fried to make it crispy for dinner. It was a staple that adapted to every meal of the day, bringing warmth and comfort, even when the cupboards were almost bare. Cornmeal mush was proof that simplicity could provide comfort, but there were times when families needed to get creative with their leftovers. This next dish was all about transforming what remained into something truly special. Potato cakes. Potato cakes were about making something from nothing. Leftover mashed potatoes mixed with a little flour, shaped into patties, and fried until crispy. Golden brown on the outside, soft inside. A perfect combination. Fried in leftover bacon grease, they had a hint of savory flavor. Families took pride in turning leftovers into something everyone looked forward to. Potato cakes turned leftover potatoes into a meal worth savoring, but there were other ways to stretch simple ingredients into comfort. Let's look at a dish that was both sweet and comforting. Depression-era milk toast. Depression-era milk toast. Milk toast was a simple, comforting dish that was often served for breakfast or as a light supper. Made by pouring warm milk over toasted bread, sometimes sprinkled with sugar or cinnamon, it was a way to make plain bread feel special. Imagine a child on a chilly morning holding a bowl of milk toast, the warmth of the milk soaking into the bread and the light sweetness making every bite a bit of comfort. For many, this was the closest thing to a treat during those hard times. Milk toast brought warmth and sweetness to tough times, but sometimes families needed something to make plain bread or potatoes a little more flavorful. That's where poor man's gravy came in. Poor man's gravy. Poor man's gravy made sure nothing went to waste. Made from meat drippings mixed with water, flour, and just salt and pepper, this gravy transformed bread or potatoes into something satisfying. Families would scrape every bit from the pan, adding much-needed flavor to even the simplest meals. Gravy could make the simplest foods feel richer, but sometimes the best meals didn't come from the pantry at all. They came from the backyard. Let's explore how families made use of what nature provided with dandelion salad. Dandelion salad. Dandelion salad was a resourceful dish made from foraged greens. Fresh dandelion leaves were gathered, washed, and tossed with vinegar or bacon grease if available. Slightly bitter but packed with nutrients, this salad turned a common weed into a nourishing meal, showcasing Depression-era creativity. Dandelion salad was all about using what was around you, simple, fresh, and available. But what about a meal that brought everyone to the table, even on the toughest days? Next, we'll look at Hoover Stew, a dish that stretched everything to the limit. Hoover Stew. Hoover Stew was a survival dish many families relied on during the Great Depression. Made from cheap ingredients like hot dogs, macaroni, canned tomatoes, and whatever vegetables were available, it stretched to feed the whole family. Picture a big pot filled with macaroni, sliced hot dogs, and tomato sauce. Simple, yet filling. Named after President Hoover, it reminded people that even the simplest combination could keep hunger at bay. Hoover Stew was the definition of stretching a meal, but for those cold days when something warm and quick was needed, egg drop soup was the go-to. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup turned a simple pot of hot water or broth into a warming dish. Just a couple of whisked eggs poured into boiling water created delicate strands. A dash of salt or pepper added flavor. This quick soup was perfect for cold winters, providing warmth and protein with minimal ingredients. It wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. Egg drop soup was simple warmth in a bowl. But what about a time when a bit of sweetness was needed, yet ingredients were scarce? Let's look at the surprising story of Vinegar Pie. Vinegar Pie. Vinegar pie was born out of necessity when fresh fruits, like lemons, were out of reach. Housewives found that vinegar, sugar, and some basic spices could come together to create a dessert that almost tasted like lemon pie. With a flaky crust and a sweet, tangy filling, this pie brought a taste of something different to households that craved variety. It was a reminder of the resourcefulness of families who found ways to bring a touch of sweetness into otherwise tough times, using whatever they had on hand. Vinegar pie offered a surprising sweetness, but there was another dessert that mimicked something even harder to find: apples. Let's move on to the cleverness behind mock apple pie. Mock apple pie. Mock apple pie was a true testament to creativity during the Depression era. Instead of apples, people used Ritz crackers to replicate the texture and flavor. With sugar, cinnamon, and a splash of lemon juice, the pie filling tasted surprisingly close to actual apples. Families who couldn't afford or access fresh fruit still got to enjoy a comforting dessert. It showed just how far people were willing to go to create familiar tastes and how imagination in the kitchen could bring joy when times were tough. Mock apple pie was all about creating familiar flavors without the usual ingredients, but let's now explore a dish that brought comfort to dinner tables: Depression-era meatloaf. Depression-era meatloaf. Meatloaf during the Depression was rarely just meat. It was mixed with fillers like oats, breadcrumbs, or crackers to stretch a small amount of ground beef. Seasoned simply and baked, it was affordable and made a little meat go a long way, turning into a dish that filled everyone's plate. It wasn't just about feeding the family. It was about making it feel like enough for all. Depression-era meatloaf stretched ingredients to make a meal for the whole family. But foraged foods were also an important part of survival. Next, we'll explore how families made use of what grew in their own backyards. Dried beans and peas. Dried beans and peas were lifesavers during the Depression. Affordable and rich in protein, they were the backbone of many meals. Families cooked large pots of beans, adding whatever they had, maybe an onion, salt, or a leftover bone. They filled bellies and could be stretched over multiple days, symbolizing resilience and turning something humble into a satisfying meal. Beans and peas were hearty and dependable, but there was also a need for occasional treats. Let's take a look at prune pudding, a simple dessert that brought a touch of sweetness into homes. Prune pudding. Prune pudding was an economical dessert that provided a sweet escape. Made from boiled prunes, sugar, and cornstarch, it was an easy way to create something special. Prunes were easy to store, and their natural sweetness made them perfect for dessert during tough times. This simple pudding gave families a comforting finish when treats were rare. Prune pudding added a bit of sweetness, but another staple that kept families going was peanut butter bread. Peanut butter bread. Peanut butter bread was a great way to add protein to a simple loaf. Made with flour, sugar, baking powder, and peanut butter, this bread was easy to make and offered something different from plain bread. The peanut butter gave it a rich, nutty flavor that was filling and satisfying, an easy way to add extra nutrition with basic ingredients. Peanut butter bread added richness, but when families needed something warm and comforting, nothing beat a hot bowl of potato soup. Potato soup. Potato soup was a staple during the Great Depression. Potatoes were cheap and filling, making them the perfect base for a simple soup. Made with just potatoes, water, and sometimes a little milk, this soup provided warmth on cold nights. If lucky, families might add an onion or a bit of butter. But even in its simplest form, it was comforting and brought people together. Potato soup offered warmth, but when families wanted a dessert that used what they had, apple pandowdy was a go-to. Apple pandowdy. Apple pandowdy was a rustic dessert that made use of whatever apples were on hand, often paired with leftover bread or biscuit dough. Sliced apples were sweetened, topped with dough, and baked until bubbly. It was a comforting dish that wasn't about looks but all about taste. Apple pandowdy brought dessert to the table with minimal ingredients, but what about a dish that turned leftovers into something new? Let's move on to leftover casserole. Leftover casserole. Leftover casserole ensured nothing went to waste. Families combined whatever leftovers they had, bits of vegetables, meat scraps, and even leftover bread, into a hearty baked dish. It was often topped with crumbs or a bit of cheese if available, turning scraps into something that felt like a complete meal. Leftover casserole made sure nothing went to waste, but even beverages had to be creative during the Depression. Let's explore how Acorn Coffee became an alternative to the real thing. Acorn Coffee. Acorn Coffee was a clever substitute when real coffee was too expensive. Families collected, roasted, and ground acorns to make a coffee-like drink. Though it didn't taste quite like coffee, it offered the comfort of a hot beverage. It showed how people used nature's resources to adapt during tough times. Acorn coffee wasn't quite the real thing, but it brought comfort during tough mornings. Potato candy. Potato candy may sound unusual, but during the Depression, it was a creative treat. Made from mashed potatoes, powdered sugar, and peanut butter, it formed a dough that was rolled out, spread with peanut butter, and sliced into bite-sized pieces. Despite the simple ingredients, it turned into a surprisingly delicious candy, proof that creativity could bring a touch of sweetness during hard times. Potato candy was an unexpected sweet, but when families needed a hearty meal, fried cornmeal fish was often a choice. Fried cornmeal fish. Fried cornmeal fish was a straightforward and satisfying dish. If someone caught fish, it was coated in cornmeal, seasoned, and fried until crispy. This dish was all about making the most of local resources and turning freshly caught fish into a flavorful meal. The crunchy cornmeal coating made it special and ensured everyone got fed. Fried fish brought something special to the table, but vegetables were often the backbone of many meals. Let's explore how vegetable hash was used to make a filling dish. Depression-era vegetable hash. Vegetable hash was all about making the most of available vegetables. Root veggies like potatoes, carrots, and turnips were chopped and fried with a bit of oil. The goal was to use every bit of produce before it spoiled, making a hearty, filling dish. It wasn't fancy, but it used up scraps, ensuring nothing went to waste. Vegetable hash made every vegetable count, but sometimes even simple garden greens were transformed into something flavorful, like in wilted lettuce salad. Wilted lettuce salad. Wilted lettuce salad made use of fresh garden greens. Lettuce was topped with hot bacon grease, causing it to wilt slightly and take on a rich flavor. Sometimes a splash of vinegar was added for tang. It turned simple greens into a warm, flavorful side dish that felt substantial. Wilted lettuce salad was a creative way to use garden greens, but when families needed something quick and easy, fried bologna was often the answer. Corn dodgers. Corn dodgers were small cornmeal cakes, either fried or baked, that served as a quick, filling addition to any meal. Made with just cornmeal, water, and salt, they were easy to prepare and provided warmth during tough times. They could be eaten alone, with gravy, or alongside soup, adding much-needed substance. Corn dodgers were all about making the most of what was available. Now let's explore another classic meal that brought satisfaction during tough times. Fried bologna. Fried bologna. Fried bologna was an affordable protein option. Slices were fried until they curled up and turned crispy. Served on bread with mustard, it made a simple sandwich that added much-needed flavor to the table. Easy and satisfying, it was a familiar comfort during challenging times. Fried bologna was simple and comforting, just like many of the meals from this era. Now, let's wrap up with a few thoughts on these forgotten dishes. These meals may have vanished, but they show the creativity and resilience of a generation. Even in tough times, we can create comfort in our kitchens. Which of these Depression-era dishes have you heard about or tried? Share your stories in the comments, and if you enjoyed this journey, like the video and subscribe for more. Let's keep these memories alive, one meal at a time.